Today on the podcast, we're launching something completely new. It's called Coffee with Contributors. And I'm going to have a cup of coffee with some of the people behind the scenes here at Nations Media. These are our writers, our photographers, our journalists, and our filmmakers. And to kick us off, we're sitting down with Gregory Woodman. He's our very first staff photographer, one of our original directors. He's the guy who helped me and Brianna Lance launch what is Nations Media today. So looking forward to this conversation, looking forward to giving you insight behind what we're doing here at Nations Media. Gregory Woodman, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, man. Excited to be here.
It's what a treat. Well, first of all, you brought us some coffee. Let's partake. I think we're at 4 minutes.
All right, let's do it.
What'd you bring us?
So this is a Colombian from a company that I started with some friends called White Label Coffee Club.
I love it.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. I teamed up with some friends in Portland, and we've been roasting for like a week now, so we're masters. No, we've got like some friends who are unbelievably talented at roasting, and we teamed up with me, who I do branding and client work, and so together we kind of started this concept that it's all excellent third wave coffee without the vanity. So
cheers.
Yeah.
Well, Greg, I've known you a long time,
Yeah.
and you've always delivered with the best coffee ever. And cheers.
Thanks,
That's
man.
really good.
Appreciate it.
Hey, what do you think of the new logo?
Oh, I like it. Okay. Sorry, this is like full on cold
First time.
view.
First reveal.
Yeah, the first thing I noticed is that N below the horizon line.
Yeah.
That I like.
Little nod to, that's a little Easter egg, actually, for Anthony Bourdain, Parts Unknown.
Oh,
Explain
that.
You're the first to know that. And the P-A-R-T, the A and the R, I think, have like a little arch to them in the logo.
Yeah.
And so I kind of fought for that.
Yeah. Okay, and explain the separation. Is there a meaning between the separation between the T and the I?
Yeah, well, I think in the earlier renditions, it just looked like the I was choking out the T. Now that I've shared that, you can't.
I can't unsee that now.
Unsee that.
Oh, it's so true. You've never in the years that we've like looked at that logo together, you've never said that to me, and I'm so glad.
On purpose. So yeah, this is the new one.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excited about it.
I really like that.
It's a little more mature, a little more journalistic. Yeah.
Let me just. That's great. Yeah, you rounded the serif slightly. It's nice.
Yeah. Well, hey, Greg, I'm so thankful that you're here, man. You were our first staff, technically. Was it you or Brianna?
I think I was first in-person staff.
That's
Brianna
right.
was first staff.
That's right.
By
That's right.
about a month.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it just with this whole coffee with contributors thing, it's just I feel like there's a space needed for people to get to know the photographers, the filmmakers. I mean, there's so much that we put into the thought behind what we do, and we don't really share it. We just produce, the content of these radical reformers from all around the world, but I think the stories of the people who are producing the content is pretty awesome too. So glad you're the first guy to be on the podcast. You're our first photographer. I want to ask you, you've had 2 covers, volume 2 and volume 4. Which one's your favorite?
Ooh.
We got the dude. Tell us about the dude.
Yeah, so volume 2, dude is his actual name. I think I like dude just because of the kind of the expression and the feel that it gave, but volume 4 was definitely more difficult to get. It was like, I think volume 2 was a really organic. I saw him and we connected and we talked for a while, and we were on a shoot, and it just made sense, and I shot his photo, and it honestly was just easy.
Yeah.
From front to back, the whole process was easy. And it was in Thailand, and it just had like all the vibes I feel like Nations needed in the early issues. I remember it was a big thing at the time, switching from a landscape to a portrait.
Right.
The jump between the cover from volume 1 and volume 2 was significant in like style and the feeling that you get, which I think they're both strong for different reasons. But this was like kind of a line in the sand for where Nations was going, which
Right.
I thought was a beautiful thing, which is people focused, reformer focused, and so I loved that kind of flip flopping that we did for a few years between portrait and landscape.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, volume 4.
That was a tough one. I mean, behind the scenes, you're filming a female in the Middle East. That's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
Most people don't realize that. But how did you get her to pose for you?
Yeah, we talked for 3 hours.
That's usually what it takes.
She's an amazing woman. She's a Syrian refugee that I met in northern Lebanon. Just war-torn, unbelievably difficult situation. It was like a refugee camp in northern Lebanon. She adopted about a family of like 7 who had lost their mom, and she came in as like a grandma figure. And we came into this refugee camp, and she was chain smoking cigarettes, like at the entrance of the refugee camp in this outfit.
Wow.
And I just looked at her, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to shoot your photo.
Yeah.
And I don't know, as a photographer in a situation like that, when you're there to document a lot of things, but your mind is just fixated on like, I must shoot this woman's photo. So it was kind of like I went and shot things in the refugee camp. I was shooting a water project, and I shot a bunch of things, and then I was like, but it always was on the back of my mind. I got to shoot this lady's photo. And so it was like winding down the shoot, and I ended up chatting with her through an interpreter for a long time. We just like sat and talked about her life and how she had like an amazing life in Syria before the war. Like all of her extended family was killed, and she just became a refugee herself and traveled to Lebanon and sought refuge and stayed there in the refugee camp. And she kind of adopted this family, like as her kind of mission in the refugee camp. And then I asked at the end of that if I could shoot her photo, and we got about 3 minutes of before she wanted to go, and we ended up just getting it. We walked through this cornfield, and that's the shot.
And it's gorgeous. I think, we worked so hard in the early years of developing kind of our mores and our values. And one of them that we've worked so hard on is finding beauty, and finding beauty in places that usually the world doesn't deem beautiful. And I think as God's created masterpiece, it's like you always bring it out in such a way that it's so identifiable. Like I don't see a news headline there. I see a grandma who I want to sit with, and I see the dude, man. I just like, look at this guy. Like I just want to hang with this guy. So
yeah,
great job. Well, hey, I want to talk about some of your favorite trips at Nations. I've got a few stories. I think of Palestine, the uprising. That was bonkers. I think of Uganda. Remember the night when the guy with the AK-47 went by our room?
Yeah, dude.
What was one of your favorite? What's been your favorite Nations assignment?
Man, that's a great question. I think my favorite was actually like 22 hours in Moldova.
That's right.
Yeah, Moldova, and not because it was like pretty or fun. It's not pretty or fun. It's a gnarly place, but it was my first time like on the front of like the Eastern Bloc, and it was kind of heavy for me because there's like a major cultural and tonal difference between like poverty around the world, and some of them, like it was my first time seeing like people that are unbelievably bitter about like their situation, and it manifests itself in culture, and it was like this odd thing where we spent more time in the Moscow airport than we did on the ground in Moldova.
Really?
Yeah. So I brought my wife Anna, which was fun, but also like it was tough. And we flew into, I don't even know how to pronounce the capital of Moldova's name. It's like Chinsiu or something like that.
Okay.
Anyway, and we were there with Brianna. She's an amazing writer, and she was writing this story. And we ended up walking. We ended up getting a cab and taking it to this random guy's house. And we walked around the city with him, and it was just like bitter cold, but everything's outdoors. And I wasn't sure why. It was like Eastern Bloc, old military, everything, and freezing. And we're taking these guys' photos, and we were there for, like, we didn't even sleep. We just flew in, shot the photos, and flew out. And it was the first time I felt like this is what, I felt like this was the first, like, assignment where I wasn't, like, having fun doing it. It was like a duty thing. It was very, like, every other nation's trip was like
building relationships.
And it was long. And Brianna ended up, like, mostly on the phone doing journalism in that way and via email. And we kind of flew in and flew out. And it was like a really difficult, cold time. And then let's think. We did Uganda.
Yeah. I mean, how many? You've been all over the world now. How many countries have you been to?
I've done 42 countries now.
42 countries. When you first started, you were like at 7.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. All over. It's been a privilege to be able to work for nations. I talk to my friends all the time about this, and it's like, if I ever somehow like was, didn't have to trade my time for money, I would, and I just had money automated, I would work for nations full time, 100%. Like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and that was always the vision, right? That you that we know as creatives, or people in the arts, as you move on in a career, you want to get married. You met Anna, and I actually married you.
Yeah.
It sounds weird to say that I married you.
Well,
I married you and Anna.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's clarify that.
No. 5 years ago this last week.
That's right. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And it was an amazing ceremony. It was the only one that I've ever forgotten to have the congregants sit down.
Yeah.
So halfway through, I'm like, oh, hey, yeah.
I mean, we didn't care. We were standing up the whole time anyway.
It was only like 100 degrees in Portland that day.
It's fine.
That was great.
Oh.
But no, I think of our origin story, and just, I mean, I remember as a youth pastor, little Gregory Woodman coming through the doors in his basketball shorts, hitting on all the girls.
Don't tell my wife that.
No, well,
I mean, I was an 8th grader.
You're an
How could I hit on girls as an 8th grader?
And man, we've done college ministry together too. Yeah. One up in Washington, one here in San Diego. We've started nations together. We've got a long history, bud.
Yeah.
I want to talk about kind of the journey you've been on the past few years. I've watched your career start from literally driving down Carlsbad Village Drive here to purchase a Volvo for $600 that barely ran. And you were homeless, but you're like, I want to be a photographer. I want to make it. Yeah. And you've had the drive. You've had the hustle. Today, you're very successful at what you do. I consider you one of the best photographers I know. And I know a lot of photographers. And so this journey, is one of marked in the past 5 years is like really your hustle and your drive. Why don't you talk to us about that? Like, what is it that makes you do what you do? Start coffee companies, like travel the world taking photos, starting companies. Like, you've done so much.
Yeah, that's a good question. What I learned early on with moving to California and being homeless for a while and like that, and like sleeping on people's couches and staying at your house too long, and
never. Rachel loves you. So do my kids.
And is that failure is not that bad. I've like failed so many times at so many different things, and failure is like a muscle that you continue to. And as a creative, it's really important to learn that because you won't take any risks if you have fear of failure. And that's the case whether you're a freelance photographer or creative, or if you're in the agency world. Like now that I'm in the agency world, or have been for the last few years, the best idea wins, and not the best person. It's not like it, So you have to learn how to disassociate your work and your ideas with your like soul.
Right.
And that's hard for a lot of people early on, is as they get so hung up and married to these ideas. And people are not people are not this French press that's going to run out with creativity.
Right.
There's like who was it? Was it E. Cummings? E. Cummings like started writing poetry in his 80s.
That's amazing.
I think that, don't quote me on that. Gosh, that might be wrong. There's a laundry list of amazing artists who started way late in life.
Yeah.
And so what that means is that you should just have no fear of failure, and failure is good for you. You know, a lot of humans nowadays have this like idea that they're fragile, or that like things can hurt them, like failure or words or ideas can be hurtful and damaging. But I actually operate under this viewpoint that humans are anti-fragile. So critiques or failure or things that go wrong actually can strengthen you, pending trauma and abuse and things like that. But other than that, failure is good. I failed like tons of times, and it takes that muscle to learn what's best and that that you can innovate. So yeah, in the photo world, you have to pitch like 10,000 times. You have to send 500 emails a week to potential clients, and you're gonna get if you're batting like 4%, you have a career.
That's pretty good.
With reach outs. Yeah, like I know for a while I was living here, I was sending at least like 200 emails a week.
Yeah.
Cold to clients.
Yeah.
Like potential clients.
But you've always had that. You've had that innate just ability to just go and I don't. Well, yeah, you weren't like, yeah, I'm going to see how I'm going to fail today. It was more like, I'm going to try everything.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
you've always been that, like, I'm going to throw my net everywhere and see what sticks. But you've always been able to uniquely be you through all of it. How have you protected your identity? Because normally when you're like, hey, I'll try anything, I'll do anything. Normally you end up becoming what is successful. So, I got this gig, and I mean, you've shot for from Nike to, like pharmaceuticals and everything in between, and yet you've amazingly been you through all of it. How have you protected your identity?
My identity does not come from my work, and it has to be one level above your work at all times. It can't be like your work can be a outflowing of who you are, but it cannot. That is like the easiest thing for creatives to do is switch that. Is become identified by the work or become identified by a skill set.
So it's easy to say.
Uh-huh.
I don't mean to cut you off and like.
No.
But I feel like it's almost like, like that's kind of the Sunday school answer.
I know.
It's like, it's not my identity, but.
Gosh, I don't know. It's like, it's hard because, okay, so to be successful as a photographer in the commercial world, you cannot have a style. You have to cater to the client's style.
That's
and
good.
so if you learn that lesson early, it removes a lot of the vanity out of it. And that doesn't mean that I'm not vain. Like I'm like, you have to have some sort of vanity to be able to sit in like big sets and take command of a creative enterprise.
Yeah.
But if people are paying you thousands of dollars to shoot, like Nike's not going to ask, what's your aesthetic?
Right.
Like they're going to give you a creative brief and they're going to say, can you nail this? And you have to deliver on that because they have a global scope that is, you have to fit into. So like, same thing with like Marriott, that I shoot for. It's you have to be able to change your gear, change your edit style, change your shooting style to adapt to what they want, because they're not paying you for you. They're paying you for them, like through you.
That's really good. I think so many young photographers are, I grew up snowboarding. And so when I got into filmmaking, it was all around snowboarding. And that was like, I didn't know how to film anything outside of snowboarding. And learning how to separate your identity from your art. So there are things that will always connect. Will always be like, oh, that's Greg's style, that you'll bring to it. But the ability to separate is important.
But then it's like, what style? Is it like, I've had 10 different styles in my career, and some of them were bad. And like I feel like things are outdated. You go through trends, you ride the waves, but there's like you have to just always believe that you got more in the tank, and that's like just got to be that like that baseline back of brain, like I'm not running out. I've got more in the tank to give. In different, maybe it's not photos. Maybe I won't know what's cool anymore in the photo world. Maybe I won't understand Gen Z and what they like. But that doesn't mean that I don't have something to offer anymore.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I've like been dealing with Like, I'm going to turn 30 this year, and a creative creativity looks different in your years and how you go. And in the photo world, it's such a young person's game.
Sure.
And it's like, how do you innovate in that, and how do you understand where things are going? But then it's just how do you carve out a niche for yourself at different stages of life is an interesting thing.
That's good. Yeah. So you've built a career, you've tried a million things, you've failed, you've succeeded. What's been the toll on you? Has there ever been a point along your journey that it's cost you anything?
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. About 3 years ago now, I was on paper and like firing on all cylinders as far as a career goes. I was shooting for like Marriott and Nike and all over the world, and I remember being like my 28th day out, and I was in like an empty hotel room in Singapore, and I remember calling Anna and saying, "Hey, I just had an anxiety attack," and not knowing like really what that was, but Googling symptoms, and I said, I don't think I should shoot photos anymore. Like that was kind of it. I had been like pretty much 5 months out, mostly like spread out about throughout the year, but away from Anna, and it was taking a toll on my mental health and my marriage. I remember like struggling with anxiety big time, and just realizing that what I had been chasing with traveling, like I had seen pillars of like men in my life and women that were unbelievably creative and well traveled and going all over the place, and thinking that that's the goal in life. And I was like, I got to go after that, and so I did. And the cost is, I had like discounted relationships, and like I was like essentially neglecting Anna. Like I was gone so much that it was really difficult to reconnect when we were back home and build more relationships up. And she was living down here, and she was a transplant, so she didn't have very many friends in Southern California. And I ultimately just had to like make a really stark decision that I was like, I need to figure out a way to make money and stay home, because I had this like heck of a drug that was like, taking photos takes me away from my wife, and it's the only way that I know how to make money.
Yeah.
So my financial situation was tied into the thing that was causing me anxiety. And so I just had to honestly, I asked the Lord, I was like, is there a way that I can just quit and stay home? And so that's why I started Weller Creative, the agency that I work for now in Portland. So we moved home. Anna and I got more stable with relationships. We moved to Portland, and I like just honestly just tried to stay home as much as possible, and I did. I didn't leave anywhere for like 2 years.
Wow.
Just going from like 5 months gone a year to staying home for 2 years is a big difference, and it just like arrested me in my tracks, and like through counseling and therapy and like I just don't really have as much anxiety about life in general, but because you can change a lot of your anxiety and your mental health by examining your situation and like changing a lot of the factors around how you live. So that's what I did, and creativity shifted for me in that moment. It went from adventure and being out in the world to more subtle, like in my brain kind of creativity, like manufacturing things and thinking about ideas. And yeah, so there was a fundamental switch when that happened. When I started focusing on my mental health, I got to finally unlock a new part of creativity for me, which was helpful.
That's incredible. So
Yeah.
like there's like this releasing that really opened up a new era that maybe 26-year-old Greg would be fearful of,
Right.
but 30-year-old Greg is thankful for.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you this. So obviously the benefits of the decisions you've made to take a step back and to invest in relationships over than adventure and, status and all this stuff, that's exponential. But how did it impact your photography?
That's a good question.
Would you say you're a better photographer today than you were when you were on the hustle?
I don't know. Because I fundamentally subscribe to the view that if you want to take better photos, go to better places.
Right.
Because I think that's true.
Sure.
I think that well, I always talk about photography like it's a magic trick. Do you know Penn and Teller?
Yeah.
They break down. I don't know where I saw it. Maybe it's Masterclass or something. But they break down magic as like they start with this operating principle that magic does not exist, and so therefore there has to be 10,000 unsexy decisions that you have to make it look amazing. And it's the same thing with photography. Like to shoot this photo, realistically, like there were 10,000 hoops that you had to jump through to get there. And there's something magical about that. You had to book plane tickets, you had to get visas, you had to get a guide, you have to get up at 4 a.m. to get to the place, you have to make sure that you have logistics, just to happen upon this woman. And then you have to talk to her for 3 hours, and then you have to get her permission. And then, there's just, and then you have to that's just that
just gets you in the space.
Right.
Then you have to execute.
Then you have to get lighting, and you have to have years of training and to be able to pull off that shot. And so there is some magic there with going to better places, and you coupling all that hard work with lighting and travel and things with skill is beautiful. And I think that that is important for a photographer to understand. And so that doesn't change. You just have to, for me, I just look for it more locally now. I just find beauty, and I find that those 10,000 hoops that you have to jump through in a different way. Instead of planes, it's studios. And instead of talking for 3 hours with a refugee woman, it's dialing and lighting nicely. So if you still think of it like it's a mountain to climb and not like just an instinctual thing, then at least for me that's helpful. I think I'm a more thoughtful photographer than I was. I don't know if I'm better. I just don't think that way. I'm just me. I don't know.
That's good.
I didn't really answer that question.
No, you did. No, you did. That was. I want to talk about spiritual formation as one thing that we kind of listen. Like the success of nations media isn't. We're not comparing ourselves to BBC or CNN or National Geographic. The success of this will be whether our families are stable, our kids still love Jesus after, we've traveled the world and given our lives to so many of these great causes. It's cool that 5 years later, we're all in a very healthy place. And that was always the goal. And we knew that at the core of the art that we were producing had to be a spiritual formation. It had to be spiritual disciplines. And we thought that kind of our early conversation was good art is going to come from a healthy relationship with God, hearing his heartbeat for society, for humanity, for the conflicts of this world, being, ethically having our hands clean of being able to go into places that are tough and create art is a weird thing. We don't want to benefit from it. We don't want to profit from it. So what has your spiritual formation journey been like the last few years? I know you've done a lot of stuff with Sabbath, and you've really protected that, and putting your cell phone away for 48 hours on end. And for you, that's amazing. Not in the fact that you've been bad at it, but just you're so connected to the world. So talk to us a little bit about just your spiritual formation last few years, what that's looked like.
So I go to Bridgetown Church in Portland, and our church thinks very critically about practicing the way of Jesus, which is just doing what he did, and maybe not even in a Great Commission kind of way, like Matthew 25 way, but in a day-to-day observation kind of way. We observe that Jesus did these things, like silence and solitude, scripture, intentionality. He came eating and drinking, and the Pharisees called him a glutton. And so what do? We throw parties, and we enjoy life with our friends, like Jesus did. And so not in a crazy way, but
no ragers.
Yeah. I mean,
sometimes.
Sure. Anyway, getting married and being with Anna every day has been great for my spiritual formation as well, because you kind of have another person that's walking alongside of you in these things to remind you of who you are and what you want to be. Because sometimes you may be yourself, but you may not act like the person that you want to. And so one thing that we've kind of hung our hat on is we call it screen hygiene or phone hygiene. You have your sleep hygiene, and now we don't really have a metric nowadays with what screens do to our physical or mental health. Mm-hmm. We don't know what having an iPhone does long term on a human. We just don't.
Right.
They've been around since '08. That's not a lot, and we're the guinea pigs in this experiment. We're the ones that are spending. We're the first humans to spend some people 6 to 9 hours of every day of their lives looking at a thing.
Right.
And that's giving off blue light. It's just on that level, but also I think for Christians specifically on a mental health level, the content that you're viewing and not in a voodoo weird way, just legitimately just the onslaught. What does that do? We just have no idea. And so for me, putting your phone away or not sleeping with it next to your bed, buying an old-fashioned alarm clock and sleeping with your phone in the other room is and from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. being away from that is a choice into being a present person in my marriage and with my friends. And Sabbath is a huge part of that. Our church practices Sabbath in a beautiful way where we essentially just sundown to sunup, or sundown to sundown, Friday to Saturday, and no phones, no screens, and we eat amazing food. We play games with our friends. We sleep. We take walks. It's awesome. And so all of that, those practices lead me closer to becoming what we call a person of love, which is the goal of life, is to be in your 80s and becoming more and more of a person that Jesus would say is like him.
Yeah.
Is loving and caring and kind and gracious. And I believe that your habits and your tendencies nowadays, where you are right now, is a bell curve of who you will be late in life. So if you're impatient and you're ungracious to people now, and you continue that without any change, you will become more of that. Whatever it is, you'll become more of that when you're in your 80s. And if that's the goal, if you want to be impatient and grouchy as an old person, then continue to be impatient and grouchy as a young person. But if you want to become more of a gracious and loving person, you need to practice that now.
Gosh, that's awesome. And Greg, it's been such an honor to be your friend and your coworker, and it's been incredible to watch you mature so much, and just sitting down with you, learning so much, and just being. I feel like everything you've just shared has just been such an awesome invitation to, I think, healthy art, being a healthy artist, and I think anybody can be a good photographer in their 20s and 30s when you can run around the world and life is simple. I think it's hard to be that poet in your 80s that you spoke of, and that's who I want to be. I want to be able to create for the rest of my life. And I think everything you spoke of is not only something you've thought deeply about, but you're also modeling. So, dude, thanks for being on our first Coffee with Contributors. Yeah. More than a contributor, a founder. Love you, buddy.